Hey guys, welcome back to another video, and today we would be learning about classes, objects and constructors. So what are classes? So classes are a core part of Java, and classes enable us to create different type of objects. So rather than going into the bookish definition, we would see an example to understand what classes are. So let's say you are a manager of a box company. So you have a machine. Let's say this is the machine, and this machine creates boxes, and all the boxes are of same size. So you have a button, and when you press the button, it generates a new box. So this machine that is generating the boxes is your class. See, the machine always generates an object, which is the box. So classes are basically doing the same thing. They're a medium to generate an object, and that object could be anything, right? And that and how do you create that object? So in the machine you have to press the button, right? So you have to press this button to actually generate that box. So that pressing the button is the object. So what are these classes and how do you write them in Java? So if you look into the book Java the Complete Reference, you can see that this is how you initialize a class. So these are the variables of the corresponding example. So think of it as the machine, right? So if this is the machine generates boxes, right? That's why the name of the machine is box. And of course the boxes would have a width, a height and a depth. So these are like the attributes of the corresponding box, and the machine knows that. And let's say the machine has some default values for each of them. Now when you press the button, which is this one, this is how you create an object. So what this is saying basically, that you want to create a box, and the name of your box would be mybox1. And when you're pressing the button on the machine, it says that I want to create a new box. So what it does, that it creates a new box, and the name of that box is mybox1. And now if let's say the corresponding box has the machine has some default values there. So let's say 10, 20 and 30, right? So when you're creating this mybox1, so your box is created, right? And your box's width, height and depth would be the default value that the machine came with. Now this is how you create objects, and that is the class. So now let's go into a bit complex and understand what are these constructors. So if you go back into the example, let's say now you have a big order where they do not want the default size. So as I said, so they do not want this default size that comes with the machine. You want to create a new size. So the order that came to you from another person says that no, I want a box with, let's say the width is 5, the height is 10 and the length is 5 again. So your machine doesn't support that, right? It only has one button which does one thing, create a box of this length. However, now you updated your machine, and now the machine has an option to take inputs from the user, which in case this is you. So you tell the machine, so this also has a button again. So this tells the machine that now the user can input the width, length and height. So you enter into the machine the width, length and height, and this creates another box which is, let's say, of this size. So this is your user input. The machine is still the same, it still creates boxes. However, now you can use so the machine has like a new feature, right? You can take inputs from the user. Now if you look into an example from the book again, this is the machine that I was talking about. So the machine would always generate a box. and that box would definitely have a width, height, and a depth, right? So the machine that you bought from, let's say, the manufacturer, they entered a default value. So if you press the button, it would always generate a box that would have these values. So remember, if you like talk a bit technical, so a class would always have a default constructor, and the default constructor would initialize values that are null. So it would generate a box. The command is to generate a box, but the box would have, or the object would have, the attributes would have null values unless you say something else. So if we do this portion here, it would have a default value. So for this case, whenever you're calling a box, it would have a default width, height, and depth, which is 10 10 10. So whenever you're creating your box, so my box 1, when it is created, and if you look into the call the method that gives you the volume, so we are going to cover methods later on, but just go with me, it would give you the volume of the box. So the volume would be 1000, meaning that when you're pressing the button, the default values are going on, for in this case, which are 10 10 and 10, and this gives you a volume of 1000. Now, as I said before, let's make things a bit complex. Now you want to input the values that you want your box to be. So your machine is now a bit complex, bit intelligent. It can take inputs from the user. Now when you're creating the constructor that's going to be default called, you are saying that I'm going to take inputs from the user and going to put them in this position. So when I'm passing the values from the user, so I'm passing the values here, here, and here, and these values would be added to that corresponding box. So I'm adding my width to the box's width, my given height to the height, and my given depth to the depth. So when I am calling the box, so creating the box, so my box 1, now I came to the machine, and in the machine I have options to put in the width, depth, and height. So I'm gonna put the depth, width, and height. So this is the width, the depth, and the length or height. And now when I'm creating my box, it would have a different volume each time. So for different inputs, it would have a different volume size. So that is it. So there are two types of constructors. One is a default that would always run, and one is my own creation. So I can create my own constructors. I can have my own version of constructors. So whenever I'm creating a box, or whenever I'm creating a new object, in this case, which is the box, I can input my own attributes. So I can input the values of my own attributes. So this is what constructors are, and that is what an class and object give us the capability to make new objects. So if you ever forget what classes are, think of it as a machine. The machine that generates or gives objects, for this case box. So what is the object? And the object here is the resultant of that class. So what does the class generate? It generates boxes, right? And what is the constructor? Constructor is a part of the class. So a constructor would always be inside of a class. So if we talk talk technical and think of it in a Java perspective. So as we saw in the example before, so all classes would have a default constructor. So if you guys did understand the concepts of classes, objects, and constructors, these are easy. However, if you get confused, think of it with an example that would really help, and try to read the book. This is a very good book that gives a lot of examples, and tries to stay consistent with one example so you don't get confused. So thank you for watching, and if you have any comments or suggestions on how I can improve the content or my presentation, then feel free to comment down below. Thank you.